Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Hit my music. Welcome back. I'm Wayne Tuttle. This is Chasing Legends. Before you get any further, hit the subscribe button, hit notifications. I know everybody's tired of this routine and whatnot, and I'll leave a comment, buy a shirt, yada, yada, yada. Legend, Superstition Mountains, Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, black, gray, long sleeve, short sleeve. There you go. This week, kind of what I want to touch upon is something I've touched upon here and there and everywhere else. This goes back quite a number of years, probably about 15 years, 12 or 15 years. And at the time, there was a lot going on. Randy Wright was doing a lot of research on the rice map, and what was the other map? There was two maps he was working on. He worked on the tin type stuff for a while, researching and kind of trying to put together a lineage and history, chronological history. And it was the Adolph Ruth profile map. And he kind of debunked out the profile map, was able to show its changes and what happened and how it had actually exchanged hands and actually been in circulation before Erwin Ruth supposedly thought he had received it. One of the problems is in number of letters with number of people. Erwin Ruth seems to not be quite sure which maps it was, though he seems to be, with Glenn McGill and a couple people, the profile map was one of the maps his father received. It also possibly was a map he got from someone else later after his father had died. So Randy was able to do this and find that the profile map had over time changed, and he was able to chronologically kind of step it back to where he saw what it was. It was an old leather map, quite a bit different, much more crude, and he did a great workup on this. It was on the second, not the original Lost Dutchman forum, but the second one that Peter Esposito had. Greg Davis might have that in his records, a copy of that post and so forth. It was done very, very well. And I don't know where Randy got with the rice paper map at the time, which, if anybody's ever seen it, is quite the mess. So during this period, because it was hot, it's summer, and he's off on doing that, I started working on a couple other things myself, and one of them was Julia Thomas's burial resting place. I kept finding things that she was in this cemetery, she was in that cemetery, she was buried the next person, this person, that person. So I found her death certificate, kind of looked, I went out a couple places, I got some people that gave me some information, and realized nothing really kind of seemed to balance out. So I sat down at a computer, and I took every death certificate in the state of Arizona from, I think at that point they went up to 1955. So everything that they had up to 1955, and I took every single birth certificate and I arranged them categorically by cemetery, because she was buried in the Jewish cemetery. I wanted to make sure it was specifically that Jewish cemetery, which is the Jewish cemetery down south of Van Buren on 35th Avenue. So I was working on that. Maybe it's 27th. I could be forgetful here. Anyways, I started researching that and researching the cemetery and how it was created and getting really in depth of the individual who had come to Phoenix, and he was he kind of was a freighter originally, and then he became kind of a store shop kind of keeper, and then started dealing in real estate. And that was one of the pieces of property he had when he passed away, and he wanted to establish a Jewish cemetery and how it was established. And a lot of people had a lot of feedback and put stuff in that was garbage, but I went by documentation and step by step, piece by piece, and did everything I could to very carefully weigh out. He's buried there at the center part. He was buried originally in the Pioneer Cemetery, and then he was moved later to there. And a number of people who were Jewish, once they had a Jewish cemetery in Phoenix. And it had its importance, and Julia Thomas is supposedly buried there. So I went out there, and then I was told she was buried by this guy named Schaefer, and that was Albert Schaefer's brother. The guy is not Albert Schaefer's brother, had no relationship to him. His name was spelled differently, came from a different family, did all the genealogy on it. So the person that was buried in the unmarked grave next to him, I was like, wow, it's right on the edge of the fence line. We actually did the ground penetrating radar. There's no body there. There was no disturbance in the earth. We kept checking. I looked through, then I went through every single grave and every unknown possible grave and the size of the graves, and we did ground penetrating radar, whether or not there's a body there or not. I think we came up with about 15 to 17 empty spots that could possibly be hers. And then I started going through old photographic records and family records of anything that there might have been some sort of headstone or something there at one time and what was missing, what could be there. Also realizing who knows what could have happened. But then I decided sometimes you want to reverse engineer something. So I went back and I said, well, Albert Schaefer was married to her. Albert, in his last will, he had two wills. The first will said he wanted to be buried next to his wife, Julia. The second will said he wanted to be buried next to his partner, Beggs. Now, I started looking at all this and found out, and now there was the old story that Julia Thomas, they had a religious cult, and they went out by Castle Hot Springs or someplace, or out in that area, and they had this group and all, and that's like a bunch of junk. Don't listen to any of that. They lived in town, had their house. Julia passed away. Albert basically sold everything out, their property and everything. And then he moves out, and he went out by Morristown. Out at Morristown, he put a little piece of property together, had a couple little claims on it, and did some farming there. So I went out, establish where those boundaries were, where he was. And I looked, and I went up and down, and it was difficult, but I was going by, there was sometimes on a topographical map, there'll be markers of burials. So I thought, I'll hit all those and then ask people in the area and see if I can find something. A lot of times those burials are just a pile of rocks or something, or there's nothing left at all. So I went out, asked some people, nothing happening. And then one day I'm down there, and I'm parked in my Bronco, and I was out in the Hacienda, and these ladies come by riding on a couple horses. And I said, good morning. And I said, by the way, and they rode over, and I said, I got this map, and this is what I'm doing. I'm doing research, and then this is material. I'm trying to do some research for the Historical Society, and I'm looking for a couple of these graves, and I've been through it. And they said, well, go over talk to so-and-so here. He's home. He's a real good guy. He's kind of gruff, but, you know, go up to him and tell him we sent you over to talk to him about it and all. So I walked over, and sometimes you hit pay dirt, because I walked up, and I said, hey, sir, excuse me. He's an old jarhead. You know, we started talking for a minute, and he kind of was just giving me the look. He was the caretaker of the ranch area. And I said, what I'm looking for, there's a couple graves on the hill. A couple gentlemen were down here, had a couple claims, a couple mine claims, and a little farm or cabin or something. And he looked at me and went, you know, I've been here for a long time, and I've been trying to figure out who those two guys that buried up on the hill behind me are. They had a cabin right over here behind this rock wall. And if you would have been here about a month earlier, yeah, one of the pit mines was right here, but I was worried about the grandchildren falling in it. Had a ladder going in it, never went down in it, but I bulldozed that thing over. So, of course, you can imagine my total disappointment. My face dropped because I'm thinking, oh, my God, you know. One, I think pay dirt. Two, I just missed that pit mine or whatever they were doing. He said the other mine was actually bound over by their cabin. You'll see back behind it. Be careful, there's a lot of Mojaves back in there. And he says they're green Mojaves back in the brush and stuff, in the grass and stuff. But he said, be careful. But he said that thing collapsed about a year or two ago. There was a lightning strike up on the cliff, and it dropped everything down. And I guess it completely collapsed the entrance of the mine. He said he'd looked down in there before, and he couldn't figure out what they were mining. But, you know, be my guest, go up the hill and all that. Told him thank you. Told him about the research I had. I'd make copies whenever I came of this, and I did later. I made him a notebook with everything in it, so he'd have it, and the ranch owner would have it. So I went up the hill, get up to the top of the hill, and I look over to my right, and there's a cabin. Now, if you go through our videos, you'll see Albert Schaefer's cabin. You'll see the video of the cabin and the old mine and all that stuff. And I kind of tell the story a bit in that. And I looked over, and I was, my God, turned my head, and there's, I can't remember what his first name was, John Beggs. It says John Beggs. And I remember that Albert Schaefer buried John Beggs on the hill by their cabin. And so I was like, oh. Right next to it is another burial. The marker's worn off. The second will says, after he had asked to be buried next to Julia Thomas, it says, bury me next to my partner, John Beggs. And I look at it and realize this is the resting place of Albert Schaefer. And, of course, still leaves me a bit high and dry, but I looked at both of them, looked around, went down to the cabin, explored the cabin and stuff. A lot of information in a day. you know, there was a lot of big stories, a lot of hoopaloo about a lot of stuff about, you know, Albert Schaefer and Julia Thomas, and I realized it started to downplay them into very ordinary people. That there were some unusual circumstances with their lives, but here's a lonely man whose partner died. He buried him on the hill, and then his last week of his life as he lays dying, he wants buried next to his wife. The two men with him that show up basically tell him, you know, obviously he's not Jewish, he can't be buried in the Jewish cemetery. Oh, they bury him up next to John Beggs, and that's that. So I come back down the hill. I got all the stuff I got tons of pictures. I got, you know, some video footage. Later brought Randy Wright and Greg Davis back, and we explored. And then I later came back and filmed again. But I'm sitting there talking to the guy on the porch, and he goes, "What do you think about that grave behind them that was never marked?" And I thought, I never really thought about that impression. So there is the very real possibility to this day. John Beggs and Albert Schaefer buried there. Those two other gentlemen were out there, realized they could not bury Albert Schaefer in the Jewish cemetery since he was not Jewish, and there maybe wasn't no place next to Julia. So they had Julia removed from the Jewish cemetery, and she is placed right there behind Albert Schaefer. Now, we've never disturbed it. I don't see any reason to. There's nothing historically that would change that. I like to think that it would be nice to have concrete evidence, but at the same time, I don't think it's worth disturbing her at this time, because they finally found peace for all the rumors and gossip and everything that's happened in their lives. So there on a lonely old little hill along the Hassayampa River outside of Morristown lies the last resting place of what I believe definitely are Albert Schaefer and John Beggs, and probably Julia Thomas. So thanks for joining us. Catch up on us all the time. Catch all the other Chasing Legends review. Catch them in the past. Looking forward to the future. Everybody stay safe and stay healthy and take care. Until the next time, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and have a good night.